Hello, and welcome to the Poetry Pea. I'm Patricia, your host for all poetry in the short form. Today, to round off what has been a little series of episodes on tanka, I thought I'd bring you something slightly different but closely related. A podcast on Kyōka. I'll start by telling you a little bit about what they are, then I'll share some examples. First from the Japanese, translated into English, of course, and then some contemporary work written originally in English. But before we dive in, I'd like to let you know that our latest volume of Haibun is out now. It's called Tendrils. You'll find a link in the show notes if you'd like to order a copy. But remember, when you're looking for it, it's volume 2 you're looking for, because of course this is our second one. There's something so special about reading poetry in a proper book, don't you think? But of course, for those of you in places that Amazon doesn't quite reach, there's also a PDF version available. Just follow the links. The standard for inclusion this time was very high, and all submissions were read anonymously. Congratulations then to Norman Silver, our editor's choice, and warm hugs to Jenny Matten and Joanna Ashwell, whose work received honourable mentions. But I must say, every piece in this journal is a wonderful example of the Haibun form. As always, Poetry Pea strives to bring you the very best poetry to enjoy and to learn from. Okay, back to what I promised you, Kyōka. What are they? Well, they're a subgenre of tanka, which literally mean wild poems. And what we're looking for in Kyōka is humour and wry social commentary, maybe. Think of them as to tanka what senryū are to haiku. And I thought I'd feature them today as I could do with a bit of cheering up. And what with the state of the world, I reckoned some of you might need a bit of cheer too. I'm going to start with a look at Kyōka written originally in Japanese. Obviously, as I said, I'm going to bring you translations, but I've altered some of them because the lineation seemed a little bit off to me, so apologies to some of the translators I'm going to use. Way back, when people started writing, I suppose, classical Kyōka, they were composed as honkadori, and we've done that in our studies of haiku. It's when a poem is written alluding to another famous text. They also used word plays, puns, and I'd like to give you your first example. In Yoshiwara, the women are showing their wares this evening, blossoms glowing in the echoes of the vesper bells. And that's Yumono Akara, translated by Stephen Carter. Often it's hard for us in the West to get the wordplay of an ancient text, particularly as we're usually working across cultures. So I won't have too many more examples of the Japanese poem. Having said that, I do have some, so do stay with me. The one I've just read to you is a play on another poem by Priest Noin, which I certainly wouldn't have known if I hadn't read about it. I thought you might like to hear the original poem. Coming upon a mountain village at nightfall on a spring day, I saw blossoms scattering in the echoes of the vesper bells. Coming upon a mountain village at nightfall on a spring day, I saw blossoms scattering in the echoes of the vesper bells. Priest Noen. I'm not sure of the translator, could well be Shirane. Anyway, to go back to the original poem, and if you're watching on YouTube, there's a slide so you can read along with me. You'd probably get the wordplay that Akara was alluding to the morals of the young ladies of Yoshiwara, wouldn't you? I'll read it again. In Yoshiwara, the women are showing their wares this evening, blossoms glowing in the echoes of the Vesper bells. Next, a not-so-subtle Kyoka from a poet of the late 18th, early 19th century, Kiko Sadamaru. Though this body, I know, is a thing of no substance, must it fade, alas, so swiftly, like a soundless fart? Though this body, I know, is a thing of no substance, must it fade, alas, so swiftly, like a soundless fart? And that was translated by Burton Watson. Obviously, being born in the UK, I'm going to find that last line of toilet humour wildly funny. I had to really concentrate hard not to laugh while I was reading it. I just can't help myself. But anyway, a person reading it back in the day will see the poem as a play on the Buddhist idea of the impermanence of things. Now, remember in last week's podcast, the How to Write a Superior Poem one, I mentioned that Dennis Garrison said that tanka should be 5 phrases and 5 lines, 5 cohesive lines, with the final being the strongest. Well, I reckon Kiko Sadamaru has probably cracked that last line, hasn't he? Like a soundless fart. I'm betraying my British roots here, aren't I? Now we're going to have one that's a little bit pathetic, but it did make me smile as well. Wakayama Bokusui is a well-known Japanese tanka poet, and he often wrote about his drinking. And this one is translated by Gregory Dunn and Goro Takano. To divert myself from this violent thirst for sake, I go out to this small garden and weed. Oh, weeds, I'm now all attention. To divert myself from this violent thirst for sake, I go out to this small garden and weed. Oh, weeds, I'm now all attention. And this is one of the translations I tinkered with. Originally, it was translated into 3 lines, but I felt it sounded better in this format. Perhaps you can play with it too and see how you think it sounds best. Oh, the joys of aging. I feel I have just crossed a boundary line in old age. I now think of sexual desire as something like a rainbow. I feel I've just crossed a boundary line in old age. I now think of sexual desire as something like a rainbow. I've taken Kirkup's translation but changed the lineation again. If you seek out the original and the citations in the show notes, it was a 5-line version. But forgive me, James, I didn't like the way it was arranged. I also tinkered with the next one. Sorry, James. I'm indulging in persistent idle fancies, like, for example, the angel's sexless bottoms as I watch passing clouds. I'm indulging in persistent idle fancies, like, for example, the angel's sexless bottoms as I watch passing clouds. Tai Azumi, translated by James Kirkup. I often sit in the garden and watch the clouds, but I've never thought of them as angels' bottoms. Usually teddy bears and rabbits, that sort of thing. Hey ho. Now, before I take a look at contemporary Kyōka written originally in English, I want to mention a little something that helps us to keep the wolf from the door. Poetry Pea runs on poetry, tea, and the odd biscuit, but it also needs a bit of support to keep the show on the road. If you sign up for a membership, not only do you help us pay the bills, but apparently it keeps the mysterious internet algorithms happy. I don't pretend to understand how they work, some sort of dark magic, I suspect, but I'm told they notice when we have members and then scatter Poetry Pea across the world like confetti at a wedding, or blossoms, cherry blossoms, beneath the Vesper bells. Now, if a membership isn't in your budget, or even buying us an occasional coffee, no worries, honestly, no worries at all. But what you can do for me is wield the mighty power of your social media. Share an episode, tell a friend, or even shout Poetry Pea from the rooftops. Honestly, spreading the word is every bit as valuable, and it would be much appreciated. So, English contemporary Kyōka. Here's something close to my heart. A missing period in a published poem that was my fault. Excited to see it in print, I don't tell the editor. A missing period in a published poem that was my fault. Excited to see it in print, I don't tell the editor. Jackie Chow, which was in Failed Tanka, a failed haiku issue, in this case issue 90. Richard Tice, our copy editor, would never let me get away with that. If there's a missing period, he'll find it, or it's a mistake that we've both made. So now I have a bit of social commentary we can all raise an eyebrow to. Election rally. The promises of politicians fill the square. My best pops of bubblegum. Election rally. The promises of politicians fill the square. My best pops of bubblegum. Oscar Luparia, also from Failed Tanka. Burgers and fries on our family road trip. Dieting the American way. A salty destination. Burgers and fries on our family road trip. Dieting the American way. A salty destination. And that's by Bonnie J. Shearer in our very own Poetry Pea journal, 624, the last time we did Tanka. And I'd urge you either to buy that journal to read it on the page, or have a look at the YouTube slides, because you'll see there's a very, very clever play on the word dieting in that poem. Spring is not usually this wet and chilly, says my neighbour, for the 4th straight year since I moved here. Spring is not usually this wet and chilly, says my neighbour, for the 4th straight year since I moved here. Tim Kremen, from Failed Tanka. And as I read that, I did wonder if Tim had a British neighbour. I do miss those conversations. My neighbours don't want to chat, full stop, but they don't want to chat about the weather, certainly. And speaking of the Brits, I have a poet who never disappoints with his vulgar poetry. Forgive me, Keith, I couldn't resist that. Keith has done a few podcasts for us, one on vulgarity in the shorter form of poetry, in the haiku. There will, of course, be a link, you know where. Contemplating the full moon alone this winter night, the loos all occupied by the women of the house. Contemplating the full moon alone this winter night, the loos all occupied by the women of the house. Two hedgehogs hump in a ditch. In the poet's notes, their undying love under the stars. Two hedgehogs hump in a ditch. In the poet's notes, their undying love under the stars. Both of those poems were by Keith Evetts, and they were in Failed Tanka. The next is a devil-may-care, Kyōka, but I can't help but feel there is what our old friend Taker would have called deep feeling in it. I wonder if you get that sense too. Have a listen. Spaghetti, spaghetti, I can twirl you all day, let the basil fall where it may. Spaghetti, spaghetti, I can twirl you all day, let the basil fall where it may. And that's by Marjorie Fazoli, also in Failed Tanka. And now I've got a few about the human condition. The first is by one of our very own editors, Vandana Parashar, from the Tanka Society of America's 7 Poems in 7 Days, Day 6, August 2020. Trying to buy a few minutes of peace from my kids. For everything else, there is a MasterCard. Trying to buy a few minutes of peace from my kids. For everything else, there is a MasterCard. I really understood that. I really understood that poem, Vandana. Absolutely. In the absence of my wife, autocorrect, telling me what I really meant to say. In the absence of my wife, autocorrect, telling me what I really meant to say. Brian Rickett, who was the editor of that Failed Tanka edition. I'd never thought of the autocorrect quite like that, but I'm very pleased to say, obviously, my husband has that on his phone too. So he never need miss me. Speaking of husbands, our house, having conversations with my husband, he snores and it creaks back. Our house, having conversations with my husband, he snores and it creaks back. Susan Birch, from Poetry Pea, Journal 6, 24. My sympathies, Susan, if that was written from personal experience. I chose this next Kyōka to close out the podcast. I've gone back to the Japanese versions. It's by Maya Suji again, and I took a translation this time by Faye Aoyagi, but changed the final line slightly and the lineation because it seemed to make more sense to me. Apologies to Faye. There is a link in the show notes so you can read her original translation. My tanka is a song of a yokel from the countryside. I have been composing honestly and sensibly. My tanka is a song of a yokel from the countryside. I have been composing honestly and sensibly. And if you were listening last week and heard my unedited tanka, you'll know that I can absolutely sympathise with that. But I have been practicing. I've been doing my 15-day challenge and they're getting better. Obviously, I can't put them in the journal because I'm the editor. That would be wrong. But maybe I'll try and get them published elsewhere. Well, that's it for Tanka this month. Next month, October 2025, I really hope I'm going to be reading your tanka during our submission window, which runs from the 1st to the 15th of October. If you happen to miss that, don't worry. Just check out our submissions diary to see what we're reading at the moment. And of course, there's always the video prompt. Well, nearly always, because we take a little break in December. Everyone needs a holiday, don't they? So, your mission, should you choose to accept it this time, is this. Catch up on all the tanka podcasts from this month, if you haven't already. Do our 15-day tanka challenge, and maybe some of the other challenges we've put in the show notes. Check our submissions diary and send us the appropriate work to the appropriate email, please. Otherwise, I get terribly confused. And take a peek at the show notes for this episode, just to be sure you know exactly what we're looking for when the submission period opens. Do not make it easy for us to reject you by sending us work that just doesn't fit the bill. But most importantly, as Taker himself would tell you if he were here, practice makes perfect. So keep writing. And I'll see you next week for more original poetry. We're going back to haiku and senryū next week. And I'm going on one of my rants. You don't want to miss that. Ciao!